Good evening. The news gang is here. Just what the Doctari ordered for your Thursday night. Tonight, the send-off, the gun salute, the processions, the speeches. Did we overdo it? The dynasties, the hustlers, the truths, the half-truths, and the not-so-true. Who is fooling who? The reggae beat is back with a bang. Who is dancing now? Plus, can the big red jogo crow once again? We'll also have the kicker, the memo, the take, the punchline, and the angle.
Judge, this. I must send him off as a true African and say, Yawa parurulo, lowangetek, Yawa parurulo, lowangetek. Woi, gimicham, we mari, gimodong tokir kigen. Woi, gimicham, we mari, gimodong tokir kigen. Choke Joey, 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 Joey.
All right, I guess I need to offer some translation.
Yes, you do.
Joe, do it. But I was telling you that the full range of meanings associated with that can be often too difficult to capture.
Why don't you use the word you used? The profundity of it.
Yes, that would have complicated matters even further. But Joey basically actually is a buffalo. Mm-hmm. And the buffalo is considered as a brave, fierce, courageous animal. And this came from this idea that when someone dies, the spirit of death or the evil spirits that caused the death in the first place are still hovering somewhere around that home. So the idea traditionally was to kind of chase them away. And one way to do that is to invoke the name of this fierce animal that everybody feared. But more importantly, at that point, someone needed to have like a shield and a spear, and the shield usually would be made using the hide of a buffalo. Oh. So that was one of those things. Oh. But then what he chants before that was actually a common saying in those parts that what you have eaten now is what you can be sure or you don't know about tomorrow. So the idea was that at some point death is going to come. So whatever you're doing now, you better do it well, do it with finality, because you don't know what comes tomorrow. So that is usually the sort of thing that is said, and usually that kind of thing tends to happen when an elder or someone who's respected in society is being mourned in that way. But I mean, that added a different twist. I don't think anybody anticipated that would happen.
I think we saw that skin,
because even the flyway ski actually looked for it, or at least someone was standing by with it, but didn't have it initially. Right. So it was
but Joe, we saw it in videos of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga during the burial of the first president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. He actually had the skin itself and the kofia made of the skin and the flyway kalifanya hivo. And I think also Raila did it during the burial of Michael Kijana Wamalwa. I think he literally
remember what he said before he did that. He actually said that, you know, the man who lies here, when they were going for the Lancaster conference, he actually went in a cow skin and this sort of so there was that thing about projecting the African image, that we are coming here as Africans, we have our cultures and that sort of thing. So I think right from the time of Jaramogi, there was always this pride in the African culture, and I think that is what he was trying to invoke. That is why he needed to preface it with the idea that, you know what I'm about to do here is not entirely strange, because even the gentleman we've come to bury basically projected his African image when they went to London. Lancaster. You've seen those images of the Lancaster conference. Yes. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
But that was just one thing that stood out. I don't know. Francis, you spent your entire week actually on this story.
He was literally reciting, you know, he even did the flyway skin.
I know, even the Joey thing, I'm sure you know all the words now. But what stood out for you throughout the week, since Tuesday last week, up to when that body was lowered there with full military honors, the gun salute and all of that?
One, a nation united in mourning. forget various things that were said about retired President Daniel Arap Moi, nice and not that, and the not so nice, but the solemnity of the event continuously from the very day Mzee Moi passed on that Tuesday early morning to yesterday when he was buried, the solemnity of it and the military works. My, beautiful stuff. And it was also historic in the sense that the last time Kenyans mourned a president, sitting or otherwise, was 42 years ago. So what many people had not seen back then, they saw it this week. So I was very happy to be part of the history, sad as it was, but this is one of those stories that you will tell our great-grandchildren in 2075.
Yvonne?
So for me, yes, it was also essentially from this end, having a front row, you know, to history, and we were here with Wahiga and reporting all of this. But for me, I think there was unity in the morning, but I think Moi divided the public in life as he did in death. You saw everybody, you know, struggling to remember what his legacy was. For some, he was generous, benevolent. For others, he was a dictator. And to all of this, I say, for whoever says he was generous to them, believe them. For whoever says, you know, he tortured them, you know, everybody has their story to tell of their experiences with it. But this is what was interesting. I don't think the young people who form the majority in this country related at all to the events of the last week. For many of them, it was a fuss about not too much.
I mean, how well do you relate to the story of
exactly. So you see, millennials, so here's the thing of Kenya's population. About 58.6 of our population is 24 years and under. 58.6 didn't live in Kenyatta's time, didn't see his burial 42 years ago, were too young to witness firsthand Moi's rule, weren't there when he was VP for 11 years. So this is just an event they could absolutely not relate to. In fact, by the time he left office in 2002, many of them were somewhere between the age of 5 and their teens.
Actually,
and so,
the 24-year-olds were 6 years old.
6 years old, yeah. So, you know, they didn't get to experience how our country changed, the silencing of the academia, the torturing, the, you know, a lot of that. So for them, it was just, okay, this is much fuss about nothing. But like I said, there was debate on whether to eulogize him, whether we overdid it, like you said, you know, in the beginning, if we whitewashed his image. But what was interesting for me is that I think everybody sort of chose to do their own thing. I mean, I think the people at Power 254, at Baraza Media Lab held their own sort of you know, sort of coming together where they talked about what they felt about him. But just the interesting thing for me is, you know, he was different things to different people. But then there seemed to be this battle, especially online, over what you can and cannot say, what you should and should not do. You know, was he benevolent? Was he a dictator? There was quite a bit of debate. So for me, it wasn't even that we were united.
But I mean, all this, Lina's just underlining the undeniable fact that Daniel Arap Moi was such a formidable figure in our politics, whichever way one looked at him.
The very manner of his send-off, Joe, illustrates that this was a larger-than-life figure. This is a person who has really impacted on the political life of Kenya. Barring President Daniel Arap Moi could not have been a family affair. Look at the sheer enormity of the logistics of burying Daniel Arap Moi. It's been a standstill for the country. And for me, and I agree with Francis, who was out there covering this story, for me, the memories of 1999, when I was a reporter, I was in Dar es Salaam when Nyerere died, Julius Nyerere died, and the state funeral was rolled out by the government of Tanzania, the government of President Mkapa, and we trailed all the way to Musoma and Butiama, the village where he was buried. And when I saw the army yesterday, starting to, actually the day before yesterday, starting to march out of State House, those memories, and the music is the same. These are traditions borrowed from the English people, the British Empire, because state funerals are reserved for monarchs. This is very high-end kind of stuff. So the music, the martial music that you hear there, is the same you would hear with any military band in the Commonwealth, you will hear them singing the same. And if you remember, there's something it does to your emotions. It's very, very,
it doesn't
very,
leave
very
you the
moving.
same.
It doesn't leave you the same. So back to the question you raised, it was proof that, look, Daniel Arap Moi could not be ignored. To the point that Yvonne raised about what was going on online. To me, unfortunately, what went on online was a meeting of ignorance and hatred, because you would find a lot of people who know nothing about Daniel Arap Moi making what they thought were very, very qualified statements. The other thing, of course, is history doesn't take excuses. We didn't cover the World War, but we know the World War. So for those who missed the opportunity to just watch what last happened 42 years ago, it's a tragedy indeed if age is the excuse that they are going to give.
For me, Joe, it's actually the shot that is on air right now that meant quite a bit for me. Robert, if you can play that again from the beginning. Yvonne, you talked about being in front of the camera.
Yes.
You were actually behind it on this other side, watching and trying to organize it all.
I remember you were in my ear.
I was in your ear and I was talking. And when we saw that shot on air of now this procession coming out of State House Gate A, we actually got goosebumps because of what we were seeing, the magnitude of it all, the music and the coordination and the fact that they were going to do that walk all the way from State House to Nyayo National Stadium, and they did it, and hawakuwa wanachoka. You know, we didn't see anyone akihema ama akionekana nasumbuka. For me, that was a really, really big moment in terms of how it had been organized and getting it all the way to the stadium.
Finality to it, it wasn't there. This is it. Imeisha. That was what was going through our heads at Allah, safari ya mwisho ya Moi. Imeanza. Of course, it ended in Kabarak when, in fact, the KDF sang what they are calling the last post by the Munros. That was like final Imeisha. That was the end. But for me, the other thing that stood out was the queues of Kenyans who came out to actually see the body of President Moi at the end Apo Bungeni. I don't know if Robert, you can show us images of Kenyans who went to line up when the body was lying in state.
213,000
according to the clerk of the National Assembly. By the end of the 3 days, over 200,000.
Some debate in different WhatsApp groups.
Exactly,
where people were saying like 200,000, and they were doing all manner of mathematics
about whether it was 200,000
there
or
were
more.
a lot of people.
There are a lot of people, and before Gashuri comes in, I think what stood out also for me, other than the number of people, was ni watu walikuwa watu wa kawaida. Literally, like watu wa kawaida. People would come all the way from Narok. We had someone who would come from Kapenguria. And some of them had a story to tell about why they were coming. But there are those who remembered him for one thing or the other. Mwingine alikuwa amesema maziwa ya Nyayo. Someone else who says they were 2-3 years old when the president left power, says alikuwa atakuja tu kumuona close up, kuona alikuwa nakaje. Yes, ilikuwa ni 5 seconds, unaingia na unatoka. But that for me was a big deal, that people actually came out up over 200,000. And the same thing also in Kabarak. I was
there, and I can tell you it was less than 5
seconds. Less than 5 seconds.
Actually, there were two files, and
on either side.
On either side, and the NYS officers and the military were, kind of rushing you.
Peter.
Even the looks on their faces, actually people who are marching without even seeing anything. They saw more of the decorations that Parliament.
Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, each person got 5 seconds. To view. Granted, 42 years ago, the population of the country was very different from what it is now. What also struck me about that Parliament shot, by the way, was how, as they were entering, did you see the look of, on the people's faces? So I think for them it was just also to witness a moment in history. But it was the first time they were in Parliament.
Absolutely.
You could tell they were looking, all the way up, and they were just... They were enamored.
For a moment, I wondered what would have happened if on occasion we keep... I know that in Parliament there is a speaker's gallery and that sort of thing, but I'm not too sure that there are tours where people just come. Any ordinary fellow walking on the street, no questions asked, as long as they've checked you and whatever, you can walk around and see whichever part of Parliament. I mean,
they go straight to the gallery,
was literally at the door of the chamber.
What you call the speaker's walkway.
That is where it was. And whoever goes there, I mean, I know that even for my time in Parliament as a reporter, there are many, many times that you would not even be found. Whenever the speaker is coming from somewhere, the kind of commotion that you see around, and they clear the entire place. So there's a sense in which those people who are coming to Parliament were also in this space for the first time. Yes. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were people who just came to see this place called Parliament.
Joe, Parliament is a house of rules and procedures. So there are some places, even for us who cover Parliament every so often, there are some places you don't access at all. look at the chamber, for example. You rarely get there. Actually, the only time you get there is when there's a house committee and it's happening in the chambers, or a big event, so to say, or a big committee meeting. However, it's not one of those places that you get into. Actually, every time I go there, I'm tempted to take a photo because you
never know when
you never know when you go back there. But to conclude, there are two interesting observations that I made. One, the young people who were there, I interacted with quite a number of them, and they were telling me they only had stories about Mzee Moi. So they wanted to come and see how he looked like. Who is this Moi that they keep hearing stories about? Then there's the older generation. There's a man I spoke to who told me he's our colleague Joe Bonyo's bishop of the Nomia Church.
Yes.
You remember him?
Nomia Church,
yeah, he told me that, and another lady, they told me that back then, people could not believe that Moi could die.
Of course.
So, one told me she came all the way from Nyandarua just to come and confirm that actually the news that she had heard
was
that
true.
Mzee Moi had died were true. Shows you the kind of a man he was when he was in power. In fact, there was this joke, I had it at Kabarak from Moi's grandson, and I had it variously in Parliament, that guys back then used to ask, Moi wa Uganda ni nani? Because it was like Moi was synonymous with presidency. So to them, Moi was not a name of a person, but the name of a president. So if you're looking for a president's name, then it must be Moi. Of course, so that's the older generation. Many things have happened. Many things have happened, and quite a number of people may not necessarily have had the information or the history about who he was, how he ruled, and so on and so forth. And that's why, as Yvonne says, granted, allow everyone to say what they can about Moi.
Yes, Linus, you were burning to say something.
Yes, I'm just thinking that one thing that cannot go unnoticed is the organization of this state event. Remember, the country did this last 42 years ago in 1978 when Mzee Jomo Kenyatta passed on. And here was a very, very well-coordinated event. I think the Ministry of Interior, the Department of Defense, State House, then the various services like the Kenya Police, the KDF, really pulled through a very, very... NYS. The sheer organization of this was really, really commendable. The government ran a flawless operation. And what I think this will do is, this is precedent setting. The Kenyatta 1978, and we go by the footage that we see, was also quite big in scale in terms especially of the number of dignitaries that attended. Remember, there are a lot of African Union leaders that came for that.
OAU at the time.
Because OAU at the time, because he was a sitting president. We had Haile Selassie. We had a lot of people coming in for the funeral. The attendance this time was not as high because this is a former president. But I think in terms of organization, very well done.
I just really want to talk about that wonderful guest who took us through everything. I mean, Brigadier General retired Ahmed Mohamed was amazing. I mean, I think I've learned more about the military, and to be honest, I think I saw more of the military than I ever did, even during Moi's times when we had, the parade and everything during public holidays. But what is interesting, Kaikai, just to pick up on what you said, in 1978 there was no precedent at all for what happens when a president dies. In fact, it is said that, General Opande then went to the British and just took their rule book as to how it's done, the script, everything, including the fact that the gun carriage that Mzee Jomo Kenyatta was on was actually the one that was used by Sir Winston Churchill when he died.
The same one?
Same one. Same one. And then now there was, all of this thing that was happening with the military was just really a sight to see, and everything, by the way, was run on time. In fact, not on time. It was ahead of time.
Actually,
and that was just spectacular.
I remember the Saturday when the body was being brought to Parliament. Guys they were caught flat-footed, so to say. Why? Because they were an hour earlier. I remember the shock from most of our colleagues in Parliament. They were not kind of prepared. They were not ready for that. In fact, people were like, ama ni rehearsal wanafanya kwanza before the main event. So it shows you the military precision. But I also liked the fact that in the military team, there's no guesswork. It's what is. precision. And I'm glad that the retired brigadier was here, because for us it was also it would have been a bit uncomfortable to comment it on some of these things.
Yeah.
I like the fact that he came here and explained these things bit by bit.
And that was refreshing, and it was because we need to go to the tribute and what people said, but there was one thing that was worthy of note, that people have asked, did we overdo it and everything? Personally, I think there's a sense in which some of the things that happened were generally a factor of the relationship that President Kenyatta himself had with former President Moi. Remember, Daniel Arap Moi was his political mentor, was like a father to him, as he said, and therefore there's a sense in which I think he felt indebted to give him the best. He went to Nyayo National Stadium himself to inspect what was going on there. The body was taken to State House. There wasn't a requirement for that. And even when the motorcade or when the procession was going to Nyayo Stadium, a point at which they rode side by side on either side of the road, and that was quite a scene to watch. But I do not think that if you had a different president, for example, who probably had a different relationship with Daniel Arap Moi, I'm not too sure that would have happened. But a very interesting show. We need to move on.
Granted, not every day a president dies.
No.
So, I mean, for us, for me,
or otherwise, even for me, I mean, I will tell you.
Want to go to the tribute?
I think we need to take a break. Robert is saying what to end a break, Kwanzaa. So I think we need to take that break.
Yes, we'll go to the break. And when we come back, we actually will be talking about what they said, the people who are in Moi's inner circle, the people who knew him in different ways. They'll be saying how they remembered Moi and the underlying messages. News Gang is back in a moment.